Welcome to today's episode of Cameron's Conversations. So, I want to talk a little bit about mindful eating. So, I will be completely transparent about this. When I first heard this, when I was first a coach, when I was 19, 20, which is, we'll just say quite a few years ago now, 11, 12 years, that's how long I've been a coach, which is pretty crazy. No wonder I have so many things I want to talk about on the podcast. But I used to think that the mindful eating thing, at least for the first little bit, was a bit like, whatever, a bit woo, basically, and that there maybe wasn't that much value in it. Now, as I got farther and farther into the world of nutrition, you realise that the numbers piece of it, it's like your calories and protein targets are the tiniest bit of the equation. So I always say this, like probably 0.005% of my job is setting someone's calories and protein. Do I do that? Yeah, absolutely. And do I set step targets and all these things? Of course we do. And there's going to be those things in place, and they're there for a reason, because hey, we need to stick to our calories to be losing weight, and if we're eating too many, we're not getting anywhere. But so much of what coaching and what nutrition is actually all to do with being in the right mindset, creating the right structure. And I want to touch on the right mindset part of this, is that eating mindfully is such a powerful tool because it increases sort of fullness within a meal. It increases psychological satisfaction with a meal as well, which I'm going to talk about. And it helps you limit what becomes like mindless eating, where you can overconsume calories incredibly quickly. Now, the example I always give about this is if you have ever, which I think we all have, sat on a sofa and you've had a bag of popcorn or crisps or whatever it is, right? You are on the sofa, you're snacking away, and before you know it, your hand is rustling at the bottom of the bag and there's nothing left. You're looking around, you're like, who's finished that? And of course, it was you. You are the villain in this story, right? Like, we obviously are mindlessly eating there. Now, if I was to ask you how much you enjoyed that, your enjoyment probably wouldn't be that high. To be clear, it's crisps, chips, popcorn. You probably enjoyed it a bit anyway, right? Like, you still enjoyed it, but your enjoyment probably wasn't a 10 out of 10, especially the latter half or the latter 2/3 of it. And why is that? Well, you've probably not paid that much attention to it at all. And you've probably eaten past the point of where you really, really enjoy it and it starts to diminish a little bit, right? And this happens with lots of things where we just overeat because it's there rather than because we're really, really enjoying it or because we need it. And the issue here is that when you are distracted, you get less fullness from the food that you eat. And that sounds like, oh, well, does it really matter that much? But the thing is, it does. And it doesn't just matter psychologically, it also matters physiologically as well. We can actually see this in studies where there is a production of your hunger hormone is actually down-regulated a little bit more when you are eating mindfully. So when you are consciously eating, maybe eating slightly slower, paying more attention to the texture and flavour, not being distracted by the TV, by your phone, which I think we're all bad for these days, just not eating whilst doing something else, or I should really say eating whilst not doing something else. That makes more sense in this context. So eating whilst not doing something else can make a massive difference to the fullness you experience. And if there's one hill that I am willing to die on when it comes to this mindfulness piece, is when we come to sort of hyper-palatable foods, or if we want to think of it as this, like, not that much, because I don't like the idea of like things should be a treat and not a treat, but let's say there's something you really fancy some chocolate, and you decide, well, actually I've got the calories to spare, I've eaten well today, I'm going to have some chocolate. Great. What not to do is to grab it from the garage on the way home, sit behind the wheel and just eat it as you go, as you drive, right? Because you, well, hopefully are paying attention to the road, fingers crossed. If you're not, that's a different set of problems. But the point is that you're driving back and you're eating this as you go, and it's completely mindless, right? You're focused on the road, you're annoyed at the person in front of you for driving so bloody slowly, and all the rest of it, and you consume that in about 30 seconds, if that, and it just doesn't feel satisfying at all. If you took that same bar of chocolate and you sit down at home, no distractions, and eat it for 2 minutes that it takes you to eat it, what you'll notice is your psychological satisfaction, you'll notice the taste, the texture more because you're not so distracted, is much higher. And what we also know is that you'll likely experience more fullness afterwards. So there really is something in this mindful eating. Now, it's not always possible to eat mindfully, right? That's not real life. And, if it's social, it is slightly less mindful because you're eating with other people and the conversation. And if it's good conversation particularly, it's probably not mindful at all. And that's fine, right? That's a trade-off. But where it's not sensible is if you are someone who is struggling at times with hunger, one of the best things you can do is eat mindfully. Now, I have had many clients think, I'm not sure that'll make much difference to me. Many clients. And I get them to do a little test. I'm like, cool, let's see, it's an experiment. Let's try it. I want you to try it for every dinner this week or whatever it is, every lunch, whatever meal they can do, with the most peace and quiet, and eat mindfully. And without fail, they'll say, actually, you know what, there is a bit of a difference there. I did feel a little bit fuller afterwards. So this is a really simple win because we're not actually changing the meals we're making, right? There are ways to make ourselves fuller with the meals and that'll be a topic for another time. This is simply eating the same bloody food, but just doing that. But something, as I say, the hill I will die on is if you are having hyper palatable, really, really tasty food, the crisps, the chocolate, the whatever it is, try not to eat that distractedly because not only can you it's not easy to double up on that without going over your calories, right? If you eat your chocolate bar distracted in the car and you're like, oh, I really fancy another one because you've not got very much fulfillment from it, the issue is you can't really feasibly just go and have another one and fit it into your calories. You might be able to have another piece of fruit. You might have a bigger portion of veggies next time. These things are, you might have a little bit more scope. But that doesn't really work well for your goals. So actually, what will help massively is just eating it in a very deliberate fashion. The other thing about it too is you will likely enjoy it more and feel more psychologically satisfied and less hard done by, because sometimes what creeps in when someone's dieting is they can start to feel like, oh, I've not had this, I've not had that in a little while, and they feel a bit about that, and actually that adds to it. It's like, oh, well, I used to have a big bag of chocolate and a family bag rather than a chocolate bar, and I don't feel as satisfied. I really miss having that. And it's like, that's because you ate it so mindlessly that you weren't paying attention when you did. And actually, when you have a smaller portion, being it mindfully, it massively helps. So I think that's a really good place to start. If there was one thing you were going to eat mindfully, it's the sort of sweet treats, the snacks, these kind of things. Try and be more deliberate with it. But it really does make a difference. And I will be the first to put my hand up and say I was quite cynical about it. I thought, does it really make much of a difference? Is there much point in it? Is it just a bit woo? And I was wrong. It actually makes a massive difference. And I think it's a really useful tool. So that's a small thing on eating mindfully. I think it's really, really useful. It's a little different for context as well from eating intuitively, which is a conversation for another time. And sometimes they get mixed up. And I think that there is definite crossover, but I think that eating mindfully is a really, really nice place to start with it. Eating intuitively when it comes to weight loss, I'm less of a fan of, but as I say, I will talk about that on another podcast. I think when we first start, and I'll just keep it very short, when you first start, because your hunger's all over the place, you've probably got lots of habits that, like we're saying, eating mindlessly, intuitive eating tends to fall flat on its face. It just doesn't work because you intuitively think you want a chocolate bar. It just doesn't really pan out. However, there can be value in the long term, but we have to learn a bit more about hunger signaling and still being structured with food and so on and so forth. So that's, as I say, topic for another time. But mindful eating is a really simple thing that you can do. So as a bit of a challenge, over the next week, try and pick maybe a couple of meals and just try and eat them mindfully. Just try and have them and have it in a way where you're not distracted. And you'll notice if you do that across a few meals, you'll see a bit of a difference in fullness. And it is really, really effective. And you can try and maybe like 10%, 15% slower and eat mindfully, then often you get quite an increase in fullness. So that's a little bit of a tip there. And if you are struggling with weight loss at the moment and you are not really getting anywhere and you've been spinning your wheels for the last 6 months, if not 6 years, then you might want to touch base about one-to-one coaching. And the link for that is in the show notes. So if you want to book a chat, well, there's no pressure at all. I will talk you through what's involved in coaching and if it's a good fit for you. And if it's not a good fit for you, I will signpost you where to go next, because I'm only going to take on clients that I feel like I can get the best results possible with. Anyway, speak to you soon. Have a great week.